Hi, and welcome to Talk of the Town. I'm your host, Kieran Allen, and this is the show that takes a closer look at the individuals and the organizations that make this community worth talking about. Today, we're going to be discussing the topic of blended families. So stay with us, Talk of the Town. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Talk of the Town. I'm Karen Allen. I'm here with Kathleen Shack, who is a counselor with Family Solutions Counseling. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Let's, first of all, we're going to be talking about a blended family or blending families. Let's define what is a blended family.
A blended family or a step family is when you have biological parents and children along with a newly incorporated person, which would be the step parent, and possibly also their own children, which would be the stepchildren.
Okay. I always call this, I kind of refer to this as the Brady Bunch
right
idea, you know, and sometimes it's as simple as there are no children from the new spouse and the other spouse has children. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, you know, we bring 3 and 3 or however it works. But what is the statistic now for blended families?
At least a third of all people in America are in a blended family, and there's actually more children that are in step families than there are in first married homes.
Okay, so that statistic shares with me that this needs to be addressed and that it needs to be talked about and spoken about instead of just saying, this is how it is, be quiet. You know, like we don't talk about it. I think it's become such a norm now that if we don't talk about it, the issues and the challenges and the great things that can happen in a blended family, they don't get recognized. And that's my hope for today's show, is that we talk about those things that make a blended family challenging, but also talk about the things that can make them great. So let's talk about it. What, in your opinion, is the biggest challenge with a blended family?
I think one of the biggest challenges is learning how to handle discipline. That's probably the first reason people call me in my office, is that they're trying to discipline. It's not going well. Kids are rebelling everywhere, and so they want to know how to handle that.
Okay.
So the key to that is that the biological parent is the one who needs to remain in charge of the discipline of their own children, and that the step parent become more of a mentor or a counselor or a friend role, so that the children have someone to go to, but they don't have to worry about them disciplining them.
Okay. Now, and that's interesting though, because, you know, as if you're stepping into that role, and I'm you know, I'm just going on, I guess, how I would feel, especially as a mom. I'm coming into this role, and if the children are not my biological children, I still feel responsible for discipline. But with that, and you know, you want to discipline, but this is all new for those children as well. So I'd imagine that there's stress between the child and the adult that's trying to discipline.
Right.
There's probably stress between the married couple, because, you know, this ain't your kid. You shouldn't be, you know, I don't discipline like that. So what are some common issues that you see when they come to you and say, what's up with the discipline? What are some of those struggles that you see?
I think one of the biggest struggles is that they haven't discussed their expectations ahead of time. So you have 2 parents and 2 sets of children possibly who are used to a certain set of household rules, a certain set of expectations, and a certain way that that parent disciplines. And when you combine all that together, you have to set up new rules, new expectations, have possibly some family rules posted somewhere in the house so that everyone gets used to how it's going to work in the future. And so I think everybody needs to have their expectations set, and you need to keep revisiting that and talk and talk and talk about what they are and how to be realistic about them.
And you know, that really isn't any different than I remember when my husband and I, you know, we had our first child, and we disciplined very differently. I mean, we had been married for a couple years, we had a baby, and all of a sudden I was like, who are you? You know, like, why are you doing that? And it was the same thing. Right. I had never shared with him my expectations. Hey, this is how I think I'm going to discipline or whatever. Then we have a kid, and he's doing it one way, excuse me, and I'm doing it another way, and it brings a lot of other issues up to the surface. So I can imagine that that would be a reason somebody would come talk to you.
Definitely.
Because discipline, and you have to discipline the children. You can't just let them, trust me, you cannot just let them go.
You can't just let them run
And
around.
I've seen what happens. It's not pretty. It has to be addressed. Well, let's talk about what, in your opinion, constitutes a successful blended family.
The most successful blended families are ones where there's open communication. Again, everyone talking all the time about anything that comes up. And families where the expectations are realistic, where the adults are being patient with the children's adjustment and giving each child time to adjust in their own way and to accept the new parent, the new step parent in their own way. And where each child feels like they still have a very solid connection with their own biological parent, and ones where the children feel like they still have permission to talk about their other biological parent and that they can include that person somehow in the family unit, even if they don't live in the same house. So the families where the parents really make an effort to work with the kids and help the kids adjust are the strongest ones.
Let's talk about it. It wasn't something I was really going to jump. We don't need to jump into this deeply, but when the other parent that is the divorcee, that you know, that's outside of the home, excuse me, how does that new step parent? I mean, you know, how do they make it comfortable for these children to still talk about their mom or their dad? I mean, what are some ways that they can kind of, because that's tough. I mean, I would imagine that it's tough. I mean,
It is.
What are some ways that they can do that?
I think having some one-on-one time with each child is very important. So the biological parents need to have time with the biological kids one-on-one, but then also the step parent, if they're in that role of being mentor or friend, they can ask a lot of open questions and really have a genuine interest about, tell me about your other parent. Tell me what kind of things you guys do together. What do you like? What is it like at your house over there? And I think the more the children feel included and accepted, then they're going to be open and it'll be a lot healthier. They'll be more resilient.
Yeah, and because, you know, it doesn't need to be volatile. It doesn't need to be taboo. You know, I mean, there's something about that gives those kids freedom. It's hard for the adults because I know there's always baggage.
Right.
You know, there's always an issue or that kind of thing, but it's so important that it's about those children. Well, you talked a lot about communicating. Why is open communication so important for all of the members of the family?
It's critical because you're going to have so many different personalities that are trying to mesh together, and each person needs to feel like they have a voice and feel important and feel understood. And so you need to have regular, open, honest communication between the parents and between all the children so that you really have a tab on how are people adjusting and what are we doing well, what are we not doing well, what do we possibly need to seek outside help for, and really holding everyone up and supporting everyone through the process instead of leaving anybody behind.
Very important. And like you said, to make them all feel like, I think especially whether it's the step parent that's coming in or the biological or the children, I think that somewhere in that realm, somebody can easily feel like they're not being heard.
Right.
You know, or now my dad doesn't listen to me, or, you know, my stepmom or my you know, there's those kinds of things, or, and it's so important. If you feel heard, you feel validated. And if you feel validated, you feel worth. And if you feel worth, you're going to do something.
Right.
You're going to do it well. And so I think it just has that fit. Let's talk about what typically happens to a newly married couple that they're getting ready to blend a family. They get married. What happens to them when they have these children to be concerned about?
What often happens is they're so concerned about the kids, and they hear all of us experts talking about hold up the kids, make sure they're okay, that they forget that they need to bond as a couple. And so they tend to skip over that whole initial married state, and that's critical not to skip that piece. So they need to be able to take time to have dates, to grab coffee while the kids are at school, something to continue to bond, solidify that marital relationship. because another reason why that's important is kids learn very quickly where loopholes are and how they can start to drive a wedge. And if they see that this new couple is a unified team and that they're strong and they're going to consult with each other on everything, then they know that they're up against a whole team and that they can't wedge in there anywhere.
Loophole's a very nice way to say the weak part. That's a really nice way to say that. But, and you know, it's really interesting to me because all these things that you're talking about, they really aren't any different than what we call the typical family. That you know, a man and a wife get married, they have children. All of these things that you're talking about apply to that kind of family as well. It's just that they tend to have to do it a little more quickly. You know what I mean? A step family is going to have to do it a little more quickly. Every typical family, or however you want to say that, when you get married and you have kids, if you don't take time to go on dates and to be best friends, one day those kids are going to leave and you're going to think, who is this person? You know, I don't even know who this is. So it's really interesting because everything that you've talked about fits both. It's just with a blended family or a step family, I think there's a lot more at risk more quickly.
Right. It all happens at once, and it all happens in the beginning instead of having nice little steps that occur over years.
Right. So real quickly, how can people get in touch with you if they need more information about the counseling? Maybe they just need to find some more information in general about blended families. How can they get in touch with you?
They can call me or they can go to my website, and my website is www.familysolutionscounselingga.com. And there's also there's a network, a big directory of marriage and family therapists that you can go to therapistlocator.net, and if you plug in your zip code, then it will find marriage and family therapists in your area, and they often have an expanded page that will tell you what their specialties are. So you could look up someone who has a specialty area in step families.
Wonderful. And again, it is it's becoming the norm to have families that are blended and to have step families. And I think your heart, I believe, is the same as mine, is that they are productive and successful and wonderful families. Wonderful families. They can be so beneficial to each other. And so thank you so much for your investment into that. We'll be back in just a minute with more Talk of the Town.